So HB 2322. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I don't think this will impact anyone on this call. Basically has to do with a Landmark Towers facility up here in Phoenix. They were concerned about um, the commercial, it was a coexisting commercial residential space, but they weren't connected. They were in an HOA together, but not connected. So if you have a facility, that's commercial on the bottom and then right above is residential, this won't apply to you. They're separate structures. But basically, the commercial portion felt like they were paying assessments that didn't benefit them at all. And so they wanted clarity that would have, Marcy, I see your question. Does that mean you can't move forward with delinquency until $10,000? It's an either or. So yes, $10,000 is now the threshold, but if they are delinquent for 18 months, that could qualify for foreclosure.
Yeah, and to clarify too, you can still follow your delinquency process, first notice, second notice, all of that. This is just for that foreclosure threshold.
Correct. Let me know if you have follow-up questions or if I didn't answer that. But 2322 basically would have said commercial assessments only are for the commercial property. Assessments benefiting residential will only be assessed to residential. And if there's mutual assessments that'll benefit both properties, then there's a structure and formula that's followed to make sure that both parties are charged accurately. So like I said, I don't think this will impact a lot of people. We made sure that it was very narrow in scope to make sure that it only remedies this issue. But if you do think that impacts you, reach out to your attorney because I do think some of the financial reporting and stuff like that will change. Senate Bill 1039. This was a fun one. If you guys have gotten these updates in years past from Jeff or Jason, you've probably heard the name Senator Kavanaugh. He finds himself in a lot of HOA issues. And so this was a nice opportunity where the industry was called to the table before a bill was introduced. Usually we're reactionary because legislators don't necessarily think to reach out to us beforehand to see if we can come to an agreement or conclusion or alternative even. But Senator Kavanaugh, who has been around the Capitol for a while, he did call stakeholders to the table at the end of last year with a constituent concern. So this constituent of his basically had requested a meeting recording. The board had recorded it, and he thought he reached out within, the correct amount of time, in the correct avenue to get a copy of the recording. And when he reached out, he heard back that the recording had already been deleted and, record of it had been destroyed. And so he reached out to Senator Kavanaugh and said, well, this doesn't really promote transparency or, maybe accurate records retention. So in order to hopefully solve that solution in Senator Kavanaugh's mind, he was planning on introducing a bill that would have required all meetings to be recorded. And also would have required you to just indefinitely keep those recordings. That is concerning. Obviously, you guys know more than I, but trying to, well, one, not everyone necessarily records their meetings. So it would have put that burden on you. And two, even if you do record your meetings, now you have to keep it for ever. That's a lot of, back office work on you and records keeping, and data collection. So we said, all right, first of all, let's not make people that don't record their meetings record them. So that's the first part of the bill that was introduced. If you do keep a recording, if the meeting's recorded, then you have to keep that for 6 months. So he, went from keeping it an indefinite amount of time to 6 months. And then you must provide that recording to a member at their request for within that 6 month period. Overall, that seemed a lot better than his original plan. The only thing we did clarify was that if someone does request a meeting recording, you must provide it as long as it already is in compliance with your records request. So if it's something that they can already request, great, status quo, but it doesn't change anything or require you to provide something if you aren't required in your bylaws. Any questions there? So far, quiet chat.
Yes.
Okay, small claims court jurisdictional limits. This is probably something you're questioning. Why does this apply to me? Ultimately, it doesn't. This would have proposed increasing the jurisdictional limit for small claims court from 3,500 to 7,500. Overall, not a huge concern. When we read it, more of an FYI for anyone that does utilize this. But we heard of a possible amendment that would have banned HOAs specifically, of all the industries, HOAs specifically, from using small claims court. So when we heard that, we had a lot of concerns. Then it was on our radar. Even if it's a not uncommon practice, I think on one of the other classes I taught, almost no one uses small claims court. But you never know what will happen. We don't necessarily want the HOA community to be banned from utilizing it. And so we had a lot of concern, reached out to legislators, and ultimately he did not provide that amendment, which was super helpful. So ultimately, all the bill did was raise the limit from 3,500 to 5,000. So overall, kind of a nothing burger. I don't think this will apply to too many, but it almost was a really big problem. These are the kinds of things that pop up that make me gray prematurely. We ad hoc. Sorry, it disappeared on my screen. Do you mind reading that, Jeff?
Yeah, sure. We ad hoc some readings of record. Do we have to keep those? Steve, you can clarify that a little bit more.
Yeah, do you mind elaborating on that just a tiny bit? We can also follow up via email.
I'll keep an eye on that and we can jump back to it if we need to.
I guess I'm just not sure what that exact document is.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that has come up with recordings is if people use almost like a transcriber AI. They're not necessarily recording the meeting, only using it for minutes, stuff like that. Does that count as a meeting recording? And honestly, the bill is unclear. It doesn't specify what type of recording. It just says if you're recording a meeting. So some of the attorneys I have talked to have said, err on the side of caution and keep it for 6 months, but that's another question for someone with a law degree.
Maybe it looks like maybe it's just they only sometimes record their meetings. It's not their standard practice. So if they record it, then they're required to keep it for that 6 months, I assume. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes. So that's how I would interpret it. It's not going to require you to record any more meetings. Just whenever you do record, I would hold on to it for 6 months.
And then this only impacts board meetings. Does this also cover committee meetings if they're recorded?
That's a good question.
Oh no, I didn't mean to stump you.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I would have to go back and look, and this is something I can follow up with you, Jeff. I'd have to go back and look and see if it defines meeting.
Okay.
And if it does, I will let you know what it considers a meeting.
Very good.
Generally, I'd imagine if it's a committee meeting where the general, like your membership isn't there usually, I'd imagine it may not fall into that, but once again, I'm not an attorney. So let me get back to you on that. All right, any other questions? Okay, so next bill, Senate Bill 1378, Political Science Homeowners Associations. It's usually without fail, there's always a flag bill. A legislator going down to the Capitol with a flag that they want to be able to fly, and trying to add it into that list of allowable flags. This is kind of flag adjacent. So basically and I'm sure you guys have probably dealt with similar issues where a homeowner wanted to display a Jesus 2024 sign. And the HOA ultimately required that it be taken down because it's, not a candidate. I did not see a Jesus candidate on either the primary or general election ballots. And also it doesn't necessarily sway one way or the other trying to influence an election. So that's the kind of finding that the HOA determined and required her to take it down. The constituent homeowner did not like this and went to Senator Mesnard to ultimately allow a sign or flag to be displayed whether or not the person was on the ballot. As you can imagine, I'm sure your guys' minds are going a mile a minute on the opportunity that could bring to your communities and all the signs that would pop up during election season. And then the other part of the bill, which was pretty insignificant compared to that provision, would have allowed a flag to be displayed under the political sign definition. So that is something where AACM, who we represent, acknowledged that this could open Pandora's box of things being displayed in people's front yards, and went down and had a discussion with Senator Mesnar just to, open kind of discussion and some of the maybe unintended consequences that would have happened because of this. So we, expressed concerns. Mr. Mesnar did not commit one way or the other, but ultimately he took out that big provision. So this will now only allow a flag to be considered a political sign, still following guidelines set out in your community. But it can be in a flag form. That usually gets a lot of questions. Any questions there?
Nothing yet.
Okay. So those are the bills that passed. Like I said, they will go into effect 90 days after the Arizona legislature signee dies, which is hopefully 90 days from Friday. But while those are the bills that kind of took up our time and attention, there are a lot of bills that were introduced by legislators that did not make it across the finish line. So a few of those that we'd like to point out are 2865, 2866, and 2442. 2865 would have prohibited any assessments that you collect from going towards attorney's fees. As you can imagine, probably you pay for those attorney's fees through assessments. So that was probably logistically going to be hard for HOAs to go through if that were implemented. Ultimately, it did make it out of the House, but it did not get a hearing in the Senate. HB 2866, this would have fined HOAs if they unlawfully enforced any laws. So I like to, say, let's say you send a violation notice, accidentally put it in the wrong person's mailbox or on the wrong person's door. You would have, depending on how many offenses you had, you could either be charged $1,000, $10,000, or $100,000. So that's a fun one. Ultimately, though, it did pass out of the House, but was not heard in the Senate. So that bill is considered dead. And then lastly, 2442 HOA's budget ratification requirements. This comes from a constituent concern. You're probably seeing a common theme there. That was trying to request a budget document from their HOA and could not get their desired document back. And so in an effort of transparency, Representative Keschel introduced 2442, which basically would have required membership approval for budgets, any increases. You could not do any assessments over CPI without approval from your membership. Logistically would have made it hard to do a lot, which is, I know you guys probably struggle with quorum already. So for these important matters, it would have made it probably a longer process for you. And then lastly, I think this is my last slide. This is just a slew of other bills that didn't make it. So, we talk about a few that passed and try to, mitigate some of the consequences that go along with it. But there are a whole slew of other issues that don't get a hearing or don't get fully through the process. Anything dealing with address lights that, shine red and blue for emergency vehicles to, declarant control when that turnover should happen. Or to shade structures. People can get imaginative. So that's just to show, there are a lot of bills that don't make it through the process. Does anyone have any questions, concerns, feedback?
Being here, boy, it's always an interesting time of year when we start discussing what changes did actually make it through and maybe get an idea of what's to come in the next years as well.
Yep, absolutely. This time keeps me busy. So I'm happy I got the opportunity to provide you guys with some updates.
All right. Well, if you think of a question later, please feel free to email me. I'd be happy to share it with Edie and then get back to you. And again, if you want a copy of the slides, if you want to put your name in the chat or just email me separately, I could be happy to give that to you as well. With that being said, I just wanted to thank you board members for taking some time out of your night to join us and to learn about these important updates. And a special thank you to Edie's team at Veridus and everything you do for us behind the scenes and keeping the HOA interest top of mind. So thank you so much and appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.
All right. Good night, everybody.